mouth feels much better. And what I'd like to do today, I'm jumping in because I have to again leave early. So I'd like to take a look at the book of Jonah, which also is mentioned in Torat Ahavah. And I actually have the set in my hands that it'll be a gift to each of you, to my dear, dear friends who have so much to do with. So everybody who's on, there's a wonderful sponsor who's helped that happen. And it'll be my great honor. I'll show you what it looks like. Give me just a second. Hold on.
It arrived as Rosh Hashanah was starting. It was like, here is your new year.
Nice.
So it's in this little box. This is what it looks like. And the box is as you suggested. And it is what it is. So I'm looking forward. Estelle, I expect you to mark it up with red pen, all the areas that you disagree with and agree with. You're on mute, Estelle. Estelle, you're on mute. Estelle, you're still, yeah.
I've got my son right here, Jonathan.
Jonathan. How are you doing?
Okay, I have a new granddaughter born the second day of Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, Mazal Tov.
Thank you.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, I've been pushing, as you know, the theme of Ahavat Yisrael, but I must say that there are a group of rabbis assembling at the UN to protest against Netanyahu. It's just not my cup of tea. It really is the UN. Look, I mean, as if we're not bashed enough at the UN. No matter what side one is on, I agree with you. I want to be true to what I said. I gotta love everybody.
No, I agree with you. Look, that's where we grew up. Obviously, the government was not, it was Beitar, but we never demonstrated dirty laundry in public and at the UN against the Israeli government.
Yeah, it's hard for me.
I think it's wrong.
All right. So we are looking at the book of Jonah, and that sounds like Jonah. And how's my honey? The highlight of my Rosh Hashanah was sitting near you and praying that prayer of Badim. I'm sorry I had to leave you but Eli ordered me to come forward. So Vivian, let's dedicate this little shiur to Sydney. And
thank you.
Vayihi Dvar Adonai El Yonah ben Amitai Lemor. And the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amitai, saying, and Shuli, my dear Shuli, who means everything to Toby and myself, if you can go back and forth so I can see everyone as much as possible, but I'm going to be bouncing off these sentences. We read Jonah in the afternoon of Yom Kippur, and I'd like to offer a particular approach to Jonah, perhaps speak for about 15, 20 minutes, and then open it up for your observations. Names in Tanakh are not just names. Names are descriptive of who we are. Jonathan, for example, Yonatan means the Lord gives. And in the spirit of V'halachta b'drachav, as God gives, the individual who carries that name, it's descriptive of one who is there for others. And I take that very, very far based on the Talmud who offers explanations for non-Jewish names. For example, the Talmud in Megillah offers reasons as to why Achashverosh, the king in the Esther story, is called Achashverosh. And the way that's done is we take an English name and we write it out phonetically in Hebrew. And when we write it out in Hebrew, we look for meaning in it. So the Talmud looked for meaning in Achashverosh. This may surprise you, but Esther is really not a Hebrew name. Esther is a Persian name, but when we write it out in Hebrew, Esther has meaning. It comes from the word seter. It's a beauty which is humble, a beauty which is modest. Or Sydney, for example, Vivian, I would argue, comes from the word yesod, foundation. What's foundational? The yesod is in Kabbalistic literature, it's one of the foundational emanations of God, one who walks the earth with that idea. Ruth, for example, is a play on the word raveh, which means saturated and overflowing with goodness. So what is it that Yonah means? Yonah is a dove, and dove is the symbol of peace. And it's not coincidental that he is the son of Amittai. Amittai comes from the word emet. And what is the challenge, the mission of the prophet? The mission of the prophet is to speak the word of God, to bring lasot mishpat v'avat chesed, to preach the message of justice and righteousness to the world. So the word of the Lord God came to Jonah. Jonah the prophet, the preacher of peace, Ben Amittai, who spoke the truth, Lemor say, Kum, rise, lech el Ninveh. Now this is in the second sentence. Kum lech el Ninveh, ha'ir hagdolah, ukra eleha. Kum, rise at once. Lech el Ninveh, go to Ninveh. Now, looking at the screen still yet, Julie, looking at the word lech, as soon as you see the word lech, the reader is reminded of the Abraham story. Abraham is told by God, lech lecha. As a matter of fact, his life is bracketed by that term. Towards the beginning, God tells him, lech lecha, you are to go to the land of Canaan. And towards the end, he is told, lech lecha, go to Mount Moriah. So lech is saturated. The reader begins to think, wait a minute, is Jonah on a similar mission as parallel to Abraham? What was Abraham's mission? His mission was to go to the land of Canaan and to bring the message of God to Canaan and to Israel and ultimately to the world. And that word kum is also a word which is found in chapter 12 of Breshit. Vayakam, vayelech. Kum lech, rise and go, el Ninveh. Let's look at that word Ninveh, if I can look at everyone for a moment. The word Ninveh is a compound of often names. You can look at it as having two pieces. So Nin, what does Nin mean? Well, I believe that Nin in modern day Hebrew is actually a great grandchild. In biblical terms, it can also mean grandchild. Nin is the future of a person. Ninveh, the grandchild, the great grandchild. They, Vav is the name of God. That's Ka, Yud Hey. The Vav and the Yud really are interchangeable. God says to Jonah, the prophet of peace, you have a task. And your task is not only to speak out to those who are already living decent lives. I want you to go to Nineveh. This is to Assyria. Now, there were times when Assyria allied itself with Israel, but ultimately Assyria was the enemy of Israel, as we find in Kings 2. Go to Assyria and understand, Yonah, that even the Assyrians are Nineveh. They are children of God. Go to Nineveh. Lech el Nineveh is Abraham. He was the one who was chosen to bring God into the world. Jonah, this is your responsibility as well. Ha'ir ha'gedolah, the very, very big city. Ukra aleha. What does ukra aleha mean? And proclaim. Now they're reading it into a judgment. Ukra aleha, that doesn't say in there ukra and proclaim judgment. It says ukra aleha, call out to them. Ki alta ra'atam lefanai. Their wickedness has come before me. Call out. Now ukra, that word ukra, is again chapter 12 in Genesis, where we're told, look at that sentence. The second word, lech, is a Genesis verb. Kum is a Genesis verb, chapter 12. Ukra, that's ultimately the goal of Abraham. The Torah says in chapter 12 that he comes to Bethel, Vayikra, and Abraham built an altar, Vayikra, and he called in the name of God. So if I can face everyone. This then is the mission of the prophet. And we are the children of Jonah. What is the mission of the Jewish people? It's to bring God into the world. That's what it's about. And to bring it in a humble way. We weren't chosen for privilege. It's a responsibility. We have a responsibility, as others have a responsibility, to do what they can to make this world a better world. Now, Jonah hears this message. Vayakam Yonah. Again, that's a Genesis word. He rises. Like when God tells Abraham to do something in the Akedah, he rises. That's an indication of alacrity. Vayakam Jonah. He stands up and he says, "Oy vey, you want me to go to Nineveh, to Assyria? I mean, that's like, you want me to go to Iraq? You want me to go to Iran? My goodness. Vayakam Yonah livroach Tarshisha." And he says, you know what? I want to escape to Tarshish. And he runs milifnei Adonai. That word milifnei Adonai, that term is found throughout the first 11 chapters of Genesis, where God says and hopes that Adam and Eve, that Cain and Noah and Noah's generation, maybe they will ally themselves with God. But the expression is they turn their face on God. Milifnei Adonai. We don't have the time now to go through text after text, but in Torat Ahavah, and actually in the very, very first essay, it talks about the first 11 chapters is humankind was turning their back on the face of God. And then Abraham, as Nachmanides says, and Sarah are asked to go to Canaan and turn people around so that they face the Lord. They can embrace the message of Mishpat V'Chesed. But what is Jonah doing? He's running from the Lord. He's running from his responsibility. And he runs to Tarshish, if I can face everyone. what is Tarshish? Tarshish is 180 degrees in the opposite direction. I know Lance is going to have something to say about this. And I'm sorry that Ellen of blessed memory, I recall her beautiful soul or memory. Where is Tarshish? Tarshish was 180 degrees in the opposite direction of Nineveh. Nineveh was to the northeast of Israel, and Tarshish is basically across the Mediterranean, Spain, which was then considered the end of the world. And the name Tarshish comes from the word Rashash. This is not made up. Rashash, if you look up the Hebrew meaning, is a word which means impoverished. It was an impoverished place because that's not the place where Jonah should have been running. But he was running to the end of the world. He didn't want anything to do with responsibility. What is leadership? Leadership is assuming responsibility. And that's what Abram and Sarah had done. What does Jonah do? He runs from his responsibility. Vayimtsa aniyah ba'a Tarshish. And he goes to the Brooklyn Harbor or whatever it is, and he finds there a boat that is going to Tarshish. Vayiten schara, and he pays for his ticket. Vayered ba lavo imahem Tarshisha, and he boards the boat, and he wants to accompany the other passengers to come to Tarshish. And I guess in those days, there were really no passengers. Everybody who was on had to contribute to the sailing of the ship. But he's running milifnei Adonai. There is the term again. And so we have the scene that is set. A few more sentences, and you'll see where I'm going. Here's what the text says in sentence 4. Vadonai hetil ruach gidolah El Hayam, but the Lord cast a mighty wind upon the sea. Vayehi Sa'ar Godo Bayam, and there was a great storm in the sea. V'ha'aniyah, and the ship Chishva comes from the word Chashav. A ship doesn't think, but it thought of breaking. In other words, it was in danger of breaking. Again, if I can face everyone. So one wonders, and here we're trying to understand almost every step metaphorically. What is the sea? Now, the sea is tough enough now. We know that those people who try to cross the Mediterranean by small boats, it's very, very complicated, very difficult. Taking your life into your own hands. I mentioned now Ruth Gromberg, who's not with us. She passed away this year, our dear Ruth. She was so proud of her. Do you remember? Her grandson, who was in that rowing contest, he rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. I was going to say he rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. Oy, oy, oy. Oh my God, could you imagine? What is the sea? The sea, let us see it as being a microcosm of the world. And the ship is like the light in the world. It's like Noah's Ark with that light. But the ship is about ready to break apart. Why is it breaking apart? Because the sea, certainly then the sea was the unknown. The sea is representative of the world in turmoil. The world is in turmoil, and Jonah is on that ship. He had run from his responsibility to Nineveh, is in the opposite direction, and suddenly, as much as he runs away, you could run, but you can't hide. He's running, but you can't hide. And then sentence 5, Vayir'u hamalachim. Vayir'u hamalachim. And the sailors, Vayiru means they were frightened. Vayizaku ish el Elohav. I think this speaks pretty positively about all of them. And they called out to their God, and Za'ak is different than Sa'ak. Za'ak is the Mordechai term, Vayizak Zakah. He's crying out, but the crying out, Za'ak means I cry out and I'm dependent on God. Za'ak means I want a plan of action. Vayizaku ish el Elohav. But they understood, as much as they're calling out to God, they have to try to do what they can to save themselves. So vayatilu et hakelim asher ba'aniyah, and they flung the ship's cargo overboard, el hayam, lehakel me'aleim, so the ship not have to carry such a heavy load. The Yonah, who should have been part of what was unfolding, perhaps helping the sailors, what does he do? Yarad el yarkite haspina. He goes down into yarkite, went down into the hold of the vessel. That word yarkite, yerech, it's a very interesting term. Thigh in the book of Genesis. It's in the Genesis story, chapter 23. When Abraham says to Eliezer, put your hand on my thigh, which is understood to me, Yerach is the symbol of circumcision, which was the covenantal connection, and it still is, between Abraham, between the Jewish people and God. Go down on Yakate, he goes down to it's punctuated with covenantal terms to indicate that he's flouting these covenantal responsibilities. Vayishkav, he lies down, Vayeradam, and he falls asleep. Now that word Vayeradam, that is the verb that is found in chapter 15 of Genesis, when it says that Abraham bitar dema, and a great sleep overcame Abraham. That was Abraham. Whenever you see Tardema, the word radam, it means something extraordinary is about ready to happen. In the Abrahamic story, what happens is the covenant of the pieces he's given. He's then chosen by God to be the father. Sarah would ultimately be the mother of the Jewish people. Abraham, he embraces that Tardema. Jonah, he takes Vayeradam. It reminds the reader of this very unusual term, Vayishkav, and he falls asleep. Vayikrav elav Rav HaChovel. So what does Rav HaChovel means? Well, literally Rav means the captain. Chovel is the ropes, the captain of the ropes, Chevel. I guess they would maneuver the ships then by its sails, by its ropes. So Vayikrav elav, so the captain of the ship comes to Jonah. Now, in that word chovel, there is an expression, chevlei leida. Chevlei leida means when the fetus comes through the birth canal, it's chevlei leida. It's like the pain, the constriction of the area when the baby comes out, but it's also an expression which is found Chevlei Mashiach, the Naomi Shemer song. Chevlei Mashiach, in the coming of redemption, it's not always so serene. There are Chevlei. Chevlei means a rope where you feel it's tied around you and you feel the tension, you feel the struggle about bringing about redemption. So Vayikra Elav, those words are not there just to be there. These are very unusual terms that are redemptive words. Vayomelo, and the captain says to Jonah, Malachon Yirdam, why are you sleeping so soundly? I would read that to mean, why are you abdicating on your Vatera, the Tardema? Why are you abdicating? Kum, rise, cry El Elohecha. That is lifted directly from the book of Genesis. when Abraham, in response to God's call, rises and he goes to Canaan, he builds an altar, and he calls out in the name of the Lord. Do your job, he's saying. Ulai tasheta Elohim lanu. Maybe God will be kind to us below Noved, and we will not be lost. Vayomru isha reyehu. And Jonah doesn't even respond. And one says to the other, Lechu v'napila goralot. Let us cast lots. V'nei da'an, we will know b'shomi hara'a hazot lanu. Let's find out on account of whom is this misfortune. Let's cast lots. Goral is a lottery. But Goral more broadly is fate. Let's cast lots and let's understand who is it that is given the fate, the responsibility, a prime responsibility to make a difference in this world. Napila gorolot. Let us cast lots. V'neidah, the word v'neidah, yada. Yada doesn't just mean to know. Yada is the most intimate term found in the Bible. Vayeda Adam et Chava ishto. Adam knew his wife Eve, it says, and she becomes pregnant. V'neidah. And we will know with whom God has a very special, intimate relationship. And we will know who has run from that responsibility and is responsible for this wrong. Vayapilu garalot, they cast the lots. Vayipol hagoral al Yonah, and the goral fell on Yonah. Vayomru elav, agida nalanu, v'asher lemi hara'ah hazot lanu. Tell us, you who have brought this misfortune upon us, what is your business? Ma malachtecha? Ume'ayin tavo, where are you coming from? Mo'art sercha, it sounds like the book of Genesis. Abraham, where is he coming from? Lech lecha el artzacha, go to your land. Ve'emi ze am ata, what people are you? Vayoma alehem, and he says, this is the clincher. Ivri onochi. What was Abraham called? Abraham the Ivri, Abraham the Hebrew. The rabbis say the whole world was on one side of the river, and Abraham the Hebrew, whenever it's Abraham the Hebrew, it's the lonely. He was the lone teacher of monotheism, of bringing goodness into the world. Ivri onochi, and onochi, it's not Ivri on ani. Anochi is a play on the 10 declarations, 10 commandments, Aseret HaDibrot. Ivri Anochi, Bet Adonai Elohei HaShamayim Ani Yareh. And he's saying, I should have been in awe and fear of God. Asher Asar Tayam Bet Hayabashad. You see how it's so full of the Genesis story. Who created the sea and the dry land? It's going back to the Genesis 1 story. Our responsibility is to those who live in this land. And the men were greatly terrified, and they asked him, Ma zot asita. I love it. What have you done? What have you done, Jonah? You've not been true to your responsibility. It's like God saying to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? And Abraham was supposed to be the one who responds. Adam runs, Ayeka. Abraham is the one who ultimately responds, Hineni, here I am. He's saying to Jonah, Mazot asita, you're going back to Adam, to whom God asks Ayeka, and he doesn't respond, Hineni. Ki yadu hanashim kim lifnei Adonai uboreach ki yigid lahem. The people knew it was in his hands and he was fleeing from God's service. For so he told them, so they say to Jonah, what should we do? The sea was growing more and more stormy. And Jonah says, you're right, I'm in the wrong. Sa'uni, lift me. V'hatiluni el hayam v'yishtok hayam me'alechem. throw me overboard. I'm the problem. I don't have the guts to be true to my responsibility. Ki yodea ani ki b'sheli hasar hagadol hazeh alechem. Vayachteru hanashim, to their credit, lashiv el hayabasha. Even though he said, throw me over, they try themselves to row to the shore. V'lo yachalu. They couldn't. Ki hayam holech v'soer aleim. The sea was so stormy. Vayikre'u el Adonai, vayomru, and they call out to the Lord and say, Ana Adonai al na novda b'nefesh ha'ish hazeh. Oh, please, Eternal One, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not hold us guilty of killing an innocent person. For you, Eternal One, by your will, have brought this about. And so they take Jonah, by Yeshua Jonah, by Yatiluhu el Hayam, by Yamod Hayam Mizapo. They throw him overboard. The sea stops raging. By Yeru Hanashim Yira Gedolat Adonai, by Yizbechu Zebach Ladonai, by Yidru Nidarim. Sounds like Kol Nidrei. I can look at everyone. And we all know what happens. The Yonah is swallowed by the whale. He's swallowed, and the whale is a mammal. It's the symbolism of the mammal, surrounded by water, and then is spewed overboard. He has now come to recognize what his mission is, and he goes to Nineveh, and indeed he succeeds, and the city of Nineveh does tshuva. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we read the book of Jonah as Yom Kippur ends, because ultimately Rosh Hashanah is about recognizing who we are as a nation, but understanding that we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the larger world, to be a beacon of light to the larger world. And that is why Rosh Hashanah, we're celebrating the birthday of the world, not only of the Jewish people. That's why by the end of Yom Kippur, we read the book of Jonah. That's the Tkiyah Gedolah at the end of Yom Kippur. It's the message. Hopefully the whole world, we're so far from that. So much more to do with the axis of evil of North Korea and Iran and Russia and China. We're far, far, far from that. And yet we still blast the Tkiyah Gedolah, the long blast, in the prayer that we each do our share to make a difference. I am uncompromisingly a lover of Am Yisrael. I love my people like no people. But as you've heard me say, a strong sense of Jewish consciousness does not contradict our universal responsibility, but it is a prerequisite to bringing the time of redemption for the world about. I want to stop here. We still have 12 or 13 minutes, and I want to get your reflections, your thoughts on this take of the book of Jonah.
All right. I see Estelle and I see Lance.
Okay, you're first.
All right. Actually,
Oh,
first,
Jonathan.
sure, thanks. Actually, first time in a long time I've read or even looked or thought about this book. Really interesting question, the point. I realized God speaks to you and I guess everyone else in the imperative. And I presume it's the imperative in biblical Hebrew. Lech, kum, not takum, velo tilech. In other words, basically he's giving him no choice. And yet Jonah behaves as if he had a choice because he went the other direction, didn't follow his name, and didn't listen to his commands, which would normally bring about a severe court-martial. He got another chance. So is this part of this story for us? It's, well, why, God could have chosen anyone who just listened to him. So is this to give us a kind of hope you get another chance apropos Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Is that kind of part of the?
Yes, I think that's it. This is really, as we're seeing it now, one can see it in so many different ways, that that Abraham's and Sarah's responsibility, God says, Lech lecha go, which is very particularistic. God says to Abraham, Lech lecha el artzecha. But by the end of those three sentences in the beginning of chapter 12 of Breshit, he says, go, kivarecha varecha, mekalelcha or, and so on, v'nivrechu v'cha, and through you will be blessed kol mishpachot adama, all the families of the earth. Unlike Adam, to whom God says, where are you? And he just runs from the responsibility. He doesn't respond, hineni. Abraham is expected to respond. He hears a calling, hineni. Ultimately, he does in the Akedah story, which is the very, very, very similar verbiage. And here, Jonah, his descendant, seems to be a throwback before Abraham. God is really saying through this story, Jonah, assume the Abrahamic responsibility. And that's what God is saying to each of us, talking to myself, letting you listen. God is saying, okay, Avi, because there's so much to do in the world and there's nothing that you can do to change everything, but what's the Chinese motto? Every long journey starts with a step. Are you doing your little thing? And with all the criticism of Israel, I'm very proud of Israel. Israel is a beacon, not only to itself, but it has an extraordinary record of doing for larger humankind.
Yeah,
people
not just
speak about Israel in that language. Just we heard this week. I'm sure some of you were in shul when Richie Torres spoke. I was so moved by that. I was so moved. He interrupted the services. Never happened. But as he spoke, I was overwhelmed. I have not, since Stephen has become the senior rabbi, I never jump up to speak without first telling Stephen, I think I want to say a few words, or I wait for him to ask me. And I normally, 90% of the time, tell him no. This is the first time I jumped up, and I was thinking, why? I'll tell you why. Because Richie Torres' predecessor was this Congressman Bauman. And in those years, I felt like unprotected, no representative. It's not just that his politics on Israel were different. I'm a big boy. I know there's right-wing politics, left-wing politics, middle politics, but it's a politics where Israel is a beacon. I mean, he's voting against the Iron Dome. He's calling Israel an apartheid state and all of that.
Yeah.
All of that nonsense. I felt like after 50 years in this community, I have no one in that, no one standing up for who we are, our community. And then Richie gets up there, I call him not Richie Torres, I call him Richie Torat. And he's eloquent. Like he says, I love Israel, not despite being a progressive, but because I'm a progressive. That doesn't mean he agrees with everything, but there is, in my opinion, there is no country on the face of this world surrounded by the enemies and threatened by the enemies that Israel is surrounded by that has a better human rights record. It doesn't mean it doesn't have its flaws. When you're a soldier and you're out there, my grandson tells me in Sukeitan, he was a kid then, that he walked into an Arab house in Gaza, and he says to me, I saw a little Arab girl, 3 years old, strapped in explosives. I never asked him what happened. What do you do? What do you do? That's what the message of this story is. That, it's in Ein Ani Li Mili, as Hillel says, if we are not for ourselves, who will be for me? But Shani Latzmi, if I'm only for myself, Mani, what am I worth? Lance, you're up.
Thank you very much. You invoked my name, and because of that, I'm going to give you the straight truth from me and my opinion.
Oh,
What I'd like to do, first of all, a question. Which world leader was the first world leader to recognize the state of Israel?
Was it Russia?
Nope.
Harry Truman.
Yep.
Oh,
Harry
Rogan
Truman.
Harry.
I'd like
Right.
to read something that Harry Truman spoke.
Right.
We are now prepared to obliterate more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have above ground in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. Now, who is the one prophet who embodies this position?
It was Truman.
No, Jewish prophet.
Jewish prophet.
Oh, sorry.
Joel?
Nope. I'll tell you.
Lance is the great professor. He knows that.
My Hebrew name is Aryeh Nachum ben Eliezer HaKohen. Embedded in my name is Nachum.
Yeah.
Who is Nachum? You never heard of Nachum? You ever hear of Isaiah? You ever hear of Jeremiah?
Yeah.
He's in the same class. He's one of the prophets.
Yeah.
So why
Nobody
aren't we
reads him.
studying him?
You studying him?
I said, why aren't we studying him?
Good question. The answer simply is that the prophet Nahum called upon God to obliterate Nineveh because the prophet Nahum knew that when the Nineveh people repented, they could care less about what they did. It meant nothing to them. And here is the ultimate irony. What is the name of Nineveh today? Mosul. And the United States at one point attacked Mosul militarily.
Yeah.
In other words, the United States attacked Nineveh. So what I'm trying to suggest is, and this is not this actually somebody else wrote an article that really gave me this thought. But the idea is that we read the book of Jonah on Yom Kippur. We should be reading the book of Nahum because Jonah and Nahum were on the same team. Jonah and Nahum were on the same team. And Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh. Why? Because he did not believe that asking the people in Nineveh to repent had any meaning whatsoever. Now, when Nahum was alive, the number one Assyrian was Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal was someone who skinned his enemies alive, who practiced ethnic cleansing, and who got rid of the Samaritans, or he ethnically cleansed and moved the Samaritans out of their place. Okay? So you're talking about the Assyrians. The Assyrians ruled for 1,000 years or something like that. Everything you read in the Bible about the Egyptians and so on and so forth, they're really talking about the Assyrians. The Assyrians were the real Nazis, the original Nazis, except that compared to Nazis, they were pretty good people. So my suggestion would be that we read both the book of Jonah and the book of Nahum is short. Take a few minutes to chant it, as a Haftorah.
Lance, as usual, just thank you so much for that insight. It's something for us to think about. There is, by the way, Lance, I think in Kings 2, try to come back with it, another story of Nineveh, which you're referring to. There's a second episode of Nineveh. So, yeah, I think, Lance, there's another side to this presentation.
Rav Avi, you know what I think of you. You know how much I respect you and love you, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that I
Very
had an
reciprocal.
obligation. You invoked my name. and I felt that I had an obligation to share my scholarship.
Please. Please. I so appreciate it, Lance. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you, Lance.
I see Ellen's hand. And you're muted, Ellen.
And Bert, my dear Bert, who leads the Chabura, I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes. I'm just wondering, Bert, if you would be kind enough to continue the discussion with everyone to moderate. Would that be okay, Bert? Just for a few minutes?
You hear me?
Yeah.
Today, is that what you want me to do?
Yeah, when I'm through, just for 5-10 minutes, because I have to run.
Okay, fine. Whoever is left over, that's
Okay.
fine.
Bert, because Bert leads a wonderful, Bert's a real Talmid Chacham, and it's an honor. Yes, please.
Ellen.
I'm struck by another parallel to the Abraham story, not just whether you go and accept responsibility, but also the complex concept of sacrifice. Because Jonah, as well as Isaac, almost become willing sacrifices, and yet God saves both of them and doesn't allow either of them to be sacrificed.
Ellen, that's so beautiful. Thank you. That's really something. Because I always wondered, why does he give up his life? What is he doing? He says, throw me overboard. And what I'm hearing you say, Ellen, is, it's just not for me. I don't want to live. I don't want this responsibility. It seems that you're looking at the binding of Isaac that way. And in the end, he has to be saved. Jonah is saved by God. That's the whale. It's like the mother. God is the mother spewing him out. I'm deeply touched by that.
And Isaac is saved
offered
too.
Lance offered a beautiful intellectual other approach, but I love what you said, Ellen. Really, thank you. Really.
I see Arnie's hands. You're muted, Arnie.
And then I'm going to have to go soon. So Bert,
Yeah.
be ready. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, isn't Chevel also in Kohelet in the beginning? The ropes.
It probably is. I don't know.
It's like utter frailty.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look it up. I can look it up now, but go ahead. I'm sorry, Arnie.
I'm just saying in Kohelet, I think when they say everything is either feudal.
Oh, you know what?
Thank you.
Oh, I see. But Arnie, at my age, even though the word here is chevel, and the word there is hevel, no, Arnie, it's close enough. It's close enough. So what are you saying? Let me hear.
Well, the captain of the ship and the sailors were all feeling feudal in the
Beautiful.
pace of the storm.
Yeah.
In
In mystical literature, Arnie, they actually say the difference with this, I'm going to unfortunately have to go. The difference between a chet is like a straight line coming down, and it's leaning on a table. You can't get in. A hay is like this here, but there's a little opening on the top left, right? So
Yeah.
Hevel is.
I'd like to say something.
You still got an opening. You still got a way. You still got a line to breathe. I just want to wish everyone a Shana Tova. And Bert, please, I'm missing the best. I hope to get into. I hope to tune in 2 minutes once I jump into this Uber. I love all of you, and I just bless you with a Shana Tova. Am I hearing Stuart in the background giving me hell?
Yeah.
Stuart
This
straightens me
makes
out.
me-
Yes,
I'm
Stuart.
very depressed. I'm lonely. But I was.
I have to
this made
call
me say
you.
because
I'm
I was.
gonna call you
I'll have
today,
to
God
come to see
willing.
me. I have a lot of problems, but this helped me a lot.
Okay.
Ravavi,
Okay.
Shana Tova Umutuka, a Gmar
Right.
Tov to you,
That's all.
as you
That's
know,
all.
and have a safe trip
I fight back. I fight back.
to Israel.
I fight back. I fight back.
I'll call
I'm very
you.
lonely depressed. And I have
Stuart.
and I don't have any social work. I fight back. That's all. That's all.
Stuart, I'm going to be in
means to me.
touch with you today. And my
I
Tova
have no social work.
Elaine.
Nobody, very few people can help me. I'm fighting back. Okay.
Yes,
Truly?
yes.
Truly, this is Bert. We'll do this together. Are there any people that still want to talk?
Yeah, I wasn't sure there was so much more. There was
Yeah,
so
if there
much more
aren't more
doing.
people, then in that case, we'll wish everybody a Gemara Chasiva Tova. You know, if there were
May
other
I?
people that want to talk, you know,
Oh,
that
is that Judy?
Yeah.
It is, yes. I wanted to make a comment on the word Hevel, or because Rabbi Weiss was saying that it is like Hevle Mashiach, but in the word Hevel, you know, now in modern Hebrew, a terrorist is a Machabel or a Chablan. So I wonder, you're probably going to ask me what is the connection, and I don't know. Can anybody think of a connection for a terrorist and the captain of the ship? I'm throwing it back to the crowd.
I can't think of anything offhand. That's way out of my pay grade.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, I really don't know. With regard to the word Hevel, another just as another interpretation is is fleeting.
Hi.
Is a very common, not common, is an interpretation. In other words, it's not that it's vanity; it's that everything is fleeting, which is an interesting
Wait a minute.
different
Wait.
interpretation.
Hang on just 1 second. Let me see if I can.
That's with a Hebert, Hevel, not
Yeah,
with
I
a
understand.
Het.
I understand. No, I understand. But if we were talking about, Kohelet, that is Havel. So I just wanted to just throw in the fact that that it was that there was an interpretation that, it's not just vanity, which is the way some people interpret it, but other people that another interpretation is that it's fleeting, which is which I think is more interesting and poetic to me rather than vanity.
I think there's also a connection between Hevel, as in Cain, and Hevel, about his bringing a korban for Hashem, that he was not of the best and not of the most productive thing. And I think that could be a real connection with Hevel and with this story, that it's not acceptable.
And just as an aside, just one other thing, I don't know which Hevel or Hevel it is. There's also something called Tefle Mashiach, the tremors of Mashiach. I don't know how that fits into all of this. I just throwing that out for you. In other words, somehow or another, all of this, meaning that it's going to get to Mashiach. I see Lance's hand is up.
Okay, let me just insert that Sigmund Freud wrote an article called The Antithetical Sense of Primal Words, so that we can translate the beginning of Kohelet, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, but at the same time, antithetically, God, God, all is God's.
As I said, my preferred thing is fleeting. So,
but the other side of the coin, if I may, one final scholarly point, and that is, think about the word teruah. Teruah has embedded in it two words, terah and ruah. Terah is supposedly the father of Abraham, but according to the book of Joshua, it's Terah who is the father of the Jewish people, not Abraham. And ruach is the spirit the wind, if you will, the voice of God.
Mm,
Okay.
Anybody else have anything that they want to
yeah,
say?
yeah.
Anybody?
I would just like, it's Fern Penn. Hi, I just want to wish everybody Gamar Chatzana Tova, a wonderful,
Mm.
happy, and a healthy new year, and we should continue to learn together for many, many more years.
Yes,
Thank
Gemara
you so
Chasiva
much.
Tova to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Meaning an easy and meaningful fast.
Before everyone signs off, even though some people have already left, I'm not sure about next week, but we do already have a substitute for the following Tuesday, which will be Rebbe Yonah Berman. So my hunch is we'll take off next Tuesday, but then we'll have a substitute the following Tuesday.
Just for those of you
Thank
that don't know Rabbi Yonah Berman,
Mm.
he's wonderful. Okay, he's a Chovevei person, and he, a Chovevei teacher, administrator. I don't know what he is, but he's terrific. Okay, so
Thank
for
you.
those of you that would say, "Who is he?" Take my word for it. He's very, 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 very interesting and very animated. So I recommend him to everybody.
Yeah, I just want to say one. Just want to
Say it
say one.
again.
Hi. I just want to say one thing about Nineveh. Remember the book and the movie The Exorcist? That's where supposedly the devil came from.
From
Remember?
Nineveh?
Yeah, that's where they're doing excavation, where the priest went to do excavation in the town of Nineveh in Iraq.
Interesting. I wonder what that what that relates to everything else here. I don't have any idea either. Do you have any thoughts about how that might relate to everything we've been talking about?
Must have been like a very evil town, because they worshipped. They must have been devil worshippers.
Is that mean? Does that mean we want Eov to? Eov was supposed to be, an exorcist.
I guess so. Yeah.
To remove the evil somehow or another.
Yeah.
It's a thought. Anybody else? Listen, have a Gemar Tov, everybody. Then
You too.
okay, take care. Kol Tov.
That in the movie or
Take
in the
care.
Bible?
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.